Hello, my name is Seth Wyckoff. I'm a master's student at the University of Georgia, and today I'll be talking about the parasites of northern bobwhite quail from western Oklahoma. Just a brief overview of the project focus and the goals. The project itself is aimed at creating a baseline health survey on northern bobwhite quail from across western Oklahoma during a 2-year sampling period. Some of the goals include establishing baseline health information through necropsies and parasite surveys, determining Oxyspira petrale, so the quail eyeworm, their infection prevalences, and characterizing gross and microscopic lesions of infected birds that we've collected. Why are we conducting this project? The northern bobwhite quail have undergone a drastic population decline of nearly 85% since the 1960s. Being one of the most popular upland game birds for hunters and outdoor enthusiasts, the bobwhite quail attract hunters from all across the state of Oklahoma and including the neighboring states as well, making them a valuable commodity for Oklahoma's wildlife departments. As you can see, I've through with the red X's and the blue X's, my field sites are scattered across western Oklahoma. In the picture, you can see that it's more or less open prairie shrublands. So from these 10 WMAs that I am sampling from, I sample twice a year, so we have 2 trapping seasons. Ideally, the goal is to get 10 birds per WMA each season, totaling 100 birds collected per season twice a year. So the yearly collection should come up to 200 birds. Just a little brief overview of the number of birds collected from the years. In 2018 is our year 0, so our preliminary year, only 73 birds were collected. The data itself is incomplete as we were still developing and evaluating methods in preparation for the first official year of the project. 2019 is year 1 of the project with only 90 birds being collected, processed, and fully tested. So this presentation will be over data from that year. 2020 was the official year 2 of the project with 40 birds being collected, and they're currently undergoing processing and testing. As you can see, we did not meet our goal for number of birds collected, and that's the typical caveat of working with wildlife. You can't guarantee that you're going to find everything that you want to find or capture all the animals that you want to capture. As far as bobwhite sampling goes, I use passive wire traps, as you can see in this top left photo. There's a door that lets them in, but they can't get out. The trap sites, typically we had them baited for a month, up to a month ahead of time. Basically just like acclimating the birds to being in that area and knowing that there's food there, and then they walked into the traps with no issues. Upon capture, the initial data that I took was aging them, getting a sex on them, weighing them, and looking at their overall external body condition, just seeing how they looked, and also drawing blood. So the first thing that we screened for were blood-borne protozoan parasites. So Hemoproteus, Plasmodium, leukocytozoans. Of the 90 birds caught in 2019, 0 tested positive for anything. And we determined this through PCR using DNA extraction of spleen. In some literature, there is implied health implications of Hemoproteus, Plasmodium, and leukocytozoan infections. So it's something that we keep an open mind and look for. As far as external parasites go, with any upland game bird, chewing lice are almost a guarantee to be there. Little to no health implications with infections of these, but they are good to know. So in figure A, you can see Gonoides ortygus. In figure B, you can see the Minicanthus species. And in figure C, you can see the Oxyliparius clavatus. Not pictured are the mites, so the Trombiculidae, which are just colloquially known as chiggers, and they just present as an orange raised mass on the skin. So looking through the prevalences, season 1 prevalences of Gonoides ortygus was at 49%, and it rose to 61% in season 2, with a little over half of the birds that we had them. As far as the Minicanthus species, much lower at 11%, but then drastically increased to 44% in season 1. Overall, about a quarter of the birds had them. The Oxyliparius clavatus, a little over 16% in season 1, 39% in season 2. Again, about a quarter of the birds had them overall. And as far as the chiggers go, we only observed them in season 1. Season 2, we did not find any, and they are by far our least seen out of this group. 100% of birds had external parasites. And like I said, low health implications, but they're good to know. Another external parasites we observed were ticks. So the 3 main species is Amblyomma americanum, also known as the Lone Star tick, Amblyomma maculatum, and Haemaphysalis loripalestris, known as the rabbit tick. Only larval and nymphal stages were observed. So in A1, you can see the larval stage of Amblyomma americanum. A2, you can see the nymphal stage. In figure B, you can see the larval stage of Amblyomma maculatum. And in figure C, you can see the larval stage of Haemaphysalis loripalestris. So Amblyomma maculatum, with only 4% in season 1 prevalence and 0 in season 2, with an overall 2% prevalence, was by large and far the least seen tick. Amblyomma maculatum had a strong showing in season 1 with 20% of birds having them. In season 2, it dipped off to 9%. Overall, only about 16% of birds had them. And Haemaphysalis loripalestris had 15%, was found on 15% of birds in season 1, found on 40% of birds in season 2. And so overall, about a quarter of the birds had this species of tick. Without being swarmed as maybe a hatchling, there's not much in the way of recorded health implications of ticks on bobwhites, but it is good to note and good to know. So now we have gastrointestinal and intramuscular parasites. So starting with the GI parasites, we have tapeworms, so the Rallatinia species. And in figure A, you can see there are several right here, all clustered together. So this is about 7 tapeworms just collected right here, all together within the intestines of a young bobwhite quail, and actually filled the intestines, which is really interesting to note. In figure B, you can see a close-up of the tapeworms with each individual segment with eggs. And then we have our cecal worms. So in figure C, here's what is considered the average amount of cecal worms you would find per bird infected with them. And it looks like a lot. And, we think having 80 worms is for a small bird, but in the grand scheme of things, it isn't. It doesn't really bother them. So with our cecal worms, 50% of birds collected had them with a mean intensity of 80 worms. The range was from 1 to 308. And that is was considered the normal range that doesn't impact the bird. As far as the tapeworms go, a low prevalence of 13%, a mean intensity of 4, and the range was only on 1 to 7. So as far as what is expected, these are within the expected and healthy ranges of the birds. Health implications for tapeworms right now is unknown. And with cecal worms, you would need so many to clog the ceca and lower GI tract for the bird to start having any kind of negative health implications from the infection, something that we did not see. So moving on, we have the quail eyeworms and some intramuscular parasites. So the eyeworms themselves, the Oxyspira petrawi. In figure A, you can see 2 worms sitting right here at the surface of the eye. They live around the surface of the eye, typically between the eye itself and the lids. So in figure B, if you direct your attention to here, you can actually see a histological slide of a bird that had the eyeworms. So this middle part right here is actually the skull. So this would be the right eye, and up here would be the left eye. These dark purple are something called the hardening gland behind the eye, at the rear of the eye. And these little intrusions here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are actually cross sections of eyeworms that have burrowed into the hardening gland. And in literature, they say that you see lots of inflammation and cellular degradation around the worms in the hardening gland, just destroying them. Interestingly enough, I guess maybe it's just a low burden we're seeing here, but you typically don't. There's only a little bit mild inflammation at most, just a bit. So the hardening gland itself is intact, and this bird was actually healthy and fine. As far as intramuscular parasites go, we had the Physoloptera species. Speciation is currently undergoing. So with the eyeworms, we had a prevalence of 14%, a mean intensity of 3, and a range of 1 to 9. Interestingly enough, right next door in Texas, in locations, they have a prevalence of 100%, a mean intensity of 23 worms per bird, and their range is anywhere from 1 to 100. So Oklahoma's quail have are much less impacted and have a lower burden, a lower intensity, and a lower prevalence significantly than their neighbors in Texas. Physoloptra themselves have only 10% prevalence, a mean intensity of 3, a range to 1 in 4, so it's not particularly common and it's not impactful upon health. Just an overview of the results. We did not detect Hemiproteus, leukocytozoan, or Plasmodium infections. The external and intramuscular parasites found were to be expected and were not found at abnormally high abundance. The GI parasites that we found were expected, and even the ones that appear to have high abundance are still within the normal range. The eyeworms themselves, the Oxyospermia petraui, were found at lower prevalence and abundance that was observed compared to what was observed in Texas. And so far, histological examinations don't reveal any indication for health concern. So this study itself provides a broad survey of parasites of northern bobwhite quail that could be useful should further population decline be noted. I would also like to acknowledge the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. Without their wildlife biologists and WMA technicians, bird collection itself would not be possible. I'd also like to thank the Southeastern Cooperative Wildlife Disease Study, in particular the Yabsley Lab, where I do all of my work out of. Without their facilities, mentorship, and guidance, I would have not been able to get any of this done. Well, I look forward to seeing any questions you guys might have. Have a great day.